Welcome. We're glad you're here. My name is Eric White. I'm the Adult Services Librarian here at the library. Thank you for joining us for a conversation with Erik Stensland about intentional solitude and silence. This program is part of our One Book, One Valley series. Every January, the Estes Valley celebrates community and literacy through One Book, One Valley, in which the community selects a book to read, and then we come together in programs and discussions around that book. This year's book is The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit by Michael Finkel. As those who have read the book know, one of the major themes of the book is solitude, and today's program is part of an exploration of that theme. I'll introduce Erik momentarily, but first, our usual disclaimer. We'd like to remind everyone that the library sees part of its mission as bringing in speakers to share their own perspectives for the enrichment of the community. Speakers' perspectives are purely their own. We don't tell them what to say, and we don't think you'd want us to. All right, now I'd like to introduce Erik. Erik Stensland is a professional nature photographer, writer, and publisher. His photography has been featured in many publications and numerous galleries and has been purchased for use in hotels, hospitals, and businesses across the country. Erik has two galleries, his primary one in downtown Estes Park, Colorado, and another in New Mexico, where he shows his desert Southwest work. He has authored 7 books, which he publishes through his own publishing company, Rocky Trail Press. His books have won many national awards, including Best Travel Book of the Year, Best Nature and Environment Book of the Year, and Best Inspirational Book of the Year. Please welcome Erik Stensland.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. All right. I'll slip in here. And hello to everyone watching online. Well, when Erik asked me to speak about intentional solitude and silence, people who know me would be surprised, but I jumped at the opportunity. I'm not known for seeking the spotlight. I kind of like to hide, but this topic is one that I'm passionate about. And it's a topic that I'm getting some reverb here. Erik, is that still on?
Nope, it's
okay. All right.
Yeah, stepping back a
little. Okay.
Speakers, that's might help.
All right. So he asked me to speak on this topic, and I was delighted to do so. But my initial thinking was, who in the world is going to show up for this talk? This is the most unpopular topic you could possibly speak on. Solitude and silence. It's definitely not something our culture promotes. And so here we are tonight with a pretty full house here and about 200 people online watching. And so there seems to be more hunger for this topic, or they just want to see, like my wife, she loves to watch videos of people climbing Mount Everest or Tommy Caldwell doing something crazy because she thinks, who in the world would do that? And maybe that's what's going on tonight. When most of us think about solitude or silence, we think of people who might be antisocial, or we think of maybe people with mental health issues, isolating themselves. And we think that's a horrible thing. Well, my goal tonight is to help you make a movement from maybe a perspective like that to being curious about this, perhaps seeing that there might be some value and some treasure to be found in this place. And I hope that at least a few of you might be encouraged to dip your toe in the water and see if this might not be a path towards wholeness for you. Now, I strongly believe, I'll tell you what, I'll go back and I'll go ahead. I strongly believe that solitude is one of the missing components in our society today and throughout most of the modern world today. Most of us live lives, it's sad to say, but I think it's true, on the surface of our lives. We're occupied with all the things we see happening around us, the news, the politics, the work we have to do, the family stuff, all the noise and entertainment. but we're not really connecting with what's going on deep inside of ourselves. And I think solitude has the chance to connect us with that. We end up oftentimes being like trees that are growing up towards the sun and reaching our branches out and collecting all the information we can, and forgetting that we need the water and nutrients that are hidden in that darkness below that we dare not look at. And so we end up growing like trees that aren't getting the right nutrients, and we wonder why are our lives a mess? Why does life not feel meaningful? And I think part of it is a lack of solitude and the chance to connect with our inner self. I believe that intentional solitude would help all of us to live deeper and more healthy lives. But beyond that, I strongly believe that it could have an impact on our communities. I think it could also have an impact beyond that on our society. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Blaise Pascal from the 1600s in France. Uh, they did everything back in those days. He was a mathematician, a physicist, an inventor, a philosopher. He did everything. And he made this quote, he gave this quote that's rather outrageous. And you're going to listen to it and think, what? And he said that all of humanity's problems stem from mankind's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Let me read that for you again. And he's talking about both male and female. We're in the 1600s. So when he says man's, it's all of us. But all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. What nonsense is that? What is he talking about? How could our world's problems stem from that? Well, inside of us, well, how should I say, we tend as a society and as individuals to be afraid of looking inside ourselves. We're afraid of what exists in the darkness down there. And we stay away from it. We keep our minds busy on everything else and avoid going inside. Could it be? Is there any possibility that the things that we're afraid of and our resistance to address those things could be at the root of our societal issues? Now, there are many different types of solitude, and not all of them are healthy. There are, although I must say, I personally believe that even the most unhealthy forms of solitude could be transformed into something positive with the right assistance and help and all of that, but most people don't have that. The first type of solitude, unhealthy solitude we have that we're all familiar with is solitude as punishment. And we had someone here standing in this same spot on Monday who went through the Colorado penal system. And here in America, about 20% of our prisoners end up experiencing a time of solitary confinement. And the man who spoke on Monday, he went in for 90 days at a time into solitary confinement. That's not the healthy solitude that I'm talking about. When it's forced, people are forced into that type of a situation. Many of them with mental health issues and other struggles, it exacerbates their problem. And there's fear and there's panic and there's this dread and the inability to cope with all the things that have been going on in their lives. And so that's a very unhealthy form of solitude. Other unhealthy forms of solitude, we've got crisis solitude. You know, uh, you might think of something dramatic like a plane crashing out in the mountains and you're the lone survivor having to survive out there. But as it happens in Rocky Mountain National Park all the time, people wandering off trail and out on their own in the middle of nowhere. And I've heard a lot of traumatic stories from that. And that is not a constructive solitude. It's actually can be quite destructive. People panicking and fear and very difficult type. Also, crisis solitude. People who lose their spouse after many, many years and find themselves alone, or older people. That's a painful, very painful form of solitude. Or solitude is escape, escape from work issues, escape from family issues, escape from the law. Many different types of solitude, and none of them are the ones I want to talk about tonight. There's also constructive solitude that's different And that's different from what I want to talk about tonight. And constructive solitude, I love. And as those of us who are introverts, we tend towards these things, listening to music by ourselves, reading a good book, uh, sitting down and writing or working on a project. And those are all wonderful forms of solitude that are very constructive. But I want to talk to you about a particular type of solitude tonight, intentional solitude, solitude for personal growth. Now, this is something that's been used for thousands of years. You like my computer generated image here for this? Yeah. I didn't take that photo. And so solitude has been used for thousands of years across the globe as a tool for personal growth, enlightenment, uh, in many different cultures and places. It used to be that if you had to make a big decision in your life, you were trying to decide, do I continue working on my father's farm for the rest of my life, or do I set sail across the Mediterranean to some far land? You go and seek advice. Well, where would you go for advice? Oh, you'd seek out a sage or a wise person or a holy man or woman. And where would you find them? Usually located in some remote, isolated place up out in the desert or on a mountain somewhere. And we had this idea that these people who had moved out to these remote places were somehow wise or knew something or had some insight into life. Why did we think that? Where did that come from? If we look at the major religions, Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, Sufism, Hinduism, all of them have this component within them of uh, going into solitude, usually in nature, as a form of spiritual enlightenment and growth. In fact, many of these religions have monks that will live out in the middle of remote places in pursuit of growth and spiritual enlightenment. Why is that something so universal across all these different religions and across such a vast part of our planet? And then we have many different cultures that will take their young people and send them out into the wilderness as part of their initiation rite to becoming adults in the process. And you'll find that amongst the Aboriginals out in Australia, many tribes in Africa, and you also find it here in the United States among some of the Native American tribes. Some of the Native American tribes have, the Vision Quest, where they'll send their young people out into the mountains or into the wilderness and say, this is how you're going to find out your purpose in life and why you exist and what you're here for. And it seems to be a practice that has happened for thousands of years in different cultures. Why again do we think that them going out on their own into the middle of nowhere is going to help them learn anything? How could they possibly, other than survival? But even Eagle Rock School just down the road, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Eagle Rock. In the summer, they have their students go out into the wilderness together for 30 days, and it's 3 weeks for 30, I can't remember which it is. But during their time away during that period, they will have each student go out for 24 hours on their own into the wilderness. They've already learned the skills so they can survive. But if you talk to those students, it becomes much more for them than just, I made it, I survived. It's they learned something. They grew in that process. They developed inside, internally. Why is that? How is that? We look and Elijah went up the mountain to meet God. Jesus went out in the desert for 40 days to prepare for his ministry. Much of the early Christian church was established by the desert fathers and mothers who lived way out. Solitude has been used as a tool for uh, internal growth, for gaining wisdom, and as a way of connecting with the divine. This idea of pursuing solitude to explore our mysterious world is an ancient one. But in our time, we've kind of given that whole thing up and said, there's solitude, there's nothing there. We're an information age. We want to get every little bit of information we can. We spend our days gathering insights. We have come to believe that anything worth knowing is going to be found in a book, library, uh, in on a YouTube video, on a podcast, in a discussion with friends, or in a presentation like this. Um, but ours is an information age, but I wouldn't say an information overload age, but I wouldn't say that we are an age of great wisdom or deep knowing or deep connection with even our own selves. What is it that this solitude provides that information doesn't? What doesn't this, all of this information, what are we lacking? I bet you can name quite a number of things. Well, on January 1st, 2004, which is 20 years and 18 days ago, I arrived here together with my wife at the edge of Rocky Mountain National Park. We've been working for many, many years in the Balkan Peninsula of Europe, running organizations, involved in all sorts of, job creation programs, ecotourism, got caught up in the Kosovo War and caring for refugees and did all sorts of things. But in the process, I completely burned out. We lost my best friend. We were working together. He died of a heart attack while we were out there. But I was at zero. I had nothing more to give and I needed to get away. So I thought, well, some reason I had this idea that the one thing I needed for restoration, I don't know where it came from, was this idea if I could just get alone somewhere beautiful, in solitude, in nature. And so I thought this is what I need. And almost miraculously, a couple days later, a friend of ours came and said, "Hey, I've got my wife's cousin is building a house at the edge of Rocky Mountain National Park in Allens Park, Colorado. Do you know anyone overseas here who might be interested in getting a break and renting her bottom floor for a little while?" I said, "Absolutely, I do." And next thing you know, my wife and I moved here for a short break, and I began to walk the quiet trails of Rocky Mountain National Park. There are quiet ones. There are. You just got to know where they are. And I'm not telling. But I began to walk those quiet trails of Rocky Mountain National Park and slowly over the months began to feel the weights drop, began to feel life returning to me, began to feel myself coming back to bloom again. And eventually decided that I needed more time than we'd given. So instead of staying for a short time, we stayed longer. And I decided I needed a job, but I didn't want to get something that would add to my stress. I wanted to do something that would allow me to continue that path of healing and to find a greater balance in my life. Because my father had died at 42 from stress, and I was on my way to hit that same mark. Um, and over these years, it's been 20 years now, I've hiked every trail of Rocky Mountain National Park so many times. I was looking the other day, and I think it was something like 12,000 miles I've hiked through the park, maybe more. I've only been counting for like 6 years, and so look back. So I yeah, and so I've spent a lot, and almost all of those 20 years in hiking was by myself in solitude. And over those years, I've come to know the healing power of solitude and silence, and to discover that in that silence, there's so much more than I had ever fathomed. Um, it's now a regular practice in my life, not just part of the hiking, but also part of my daily practice, as well as part of it's something I do on regular occasions. I'll take an extended period of time away. One of the last ones I took was for about 3.5 weeks, and I went out to hermitage overlooking the Pacific coast and spent it in silence. And it was one of the most transformational experiences of my entire life, maybe the most transformational. But I've come to know the power of silence and solitude. And probably the main thing I want you to take away, and I'm just getting going here, so don't think I'm finishing up, but one of the main things I want you to take away this evening is that solitude, when combined with stillness and silence, is the doorway to enter our inner world. It's there we discover who we are at the core, what we believe most deeply, why we believe it, what we long for, what we ache for, why we do what we do, and so much more. Things that we think we know, but we really don't know too often. It's where our deepest, truest self is located. And when you think about who you are at the core, when you peel away work, when you peel away family, when you peel away all your hobbies and events, who are you? Are you anyone at all? Is there anything even there? There is. But you can't access your inner world just by getting more information. It won't get you there. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a popular British television show. It's been running since 1963, Doctor Who. Love that show. It's a lot of fun. Um, but he travels through space and time in a British phone box, of course. And he calls it his TARDIS. And when people, he always takes people traveling with him across space and time. And the funny thing is, every person who steps into his little phone box looks around and goes, how is this possible? It's bigger on the inside than the outside. That doesn't make any sense at all. In fact, it's so big that there are, well, many, many rooms in there and many, many floors. It's easy to get lost. So be careful if you're ever invited into a TARDIS. But this, to me, is very much a picture of what I've found myself of our inner world. You look at it from the outside and go, yeah, okay, it's who I think I am, and it's just my brain in there and how I think about myself. But you open that door and you find out, oh my goodness, there's this vast cavern that seems to be almost unexplainable, unexplorable, just vast and so much bigger than we would ever imagine. And somehow it seems to evade our ability to define, to dissect, to study and measure. And I think that scares us. I think that's part of what scares us about our inner world is it kind of defies our logic, our desire to control, which is what a lot of our information is. It's a desire for control. And then we want to understand so we can control it. And this seems to evade that. Now, some years ago, the BBC in Britain, British Broadcasting Corporation, I think it was 2006. They put together a TV show that was a little interesting. It was a series, I think 3 or 4 episodes. And what they did is they recruited 5 individuals from normal daily life. I think one was like a head of a marketing company. I think one was in a lawyer or something in that regards. I think another was ran a pub or something. But these people, I can't remember what the others were, but these were all busy people who had busy lives, stressful lives. And I think the BBC came to them and they invited them to do this thing, and they thought, a vacation paid for by the BBC. Sounds wonderful. I'm in. But it was, they took 5 people from ordinary life and brought them to a Benedictine monastery for 8 days of solitude and silence. And when these guys arrived, they all were going, this is weird. This is crazy. And by the end of the first day, I don't think I want to be here anymore. This is awful. Take me out of here. By the second day, complete almost panic and hating the thing. But as they began to eventually settle into this silence, I mean, they'd never imagined something like this. They settled into this solitude and this silence, and they began to encounter the pains of their life that they've been ignoring for so many years, all the things that were going on behind the scenes in their life that they had been kind of keeping at bay. And many of them started over those days, began to walk through those issues and come towards a place of healing on the other side. And some, almost, I think all of them reached a place where they were said, I'm at this sense of peace. I've never been here before. This is weird. I feel wonderful and I have a new perspective on my life and why I exist and what I'm doing here. And many of them, even some of the most anti-spiritual or religious, said, I'm encountering a welcoming presence here. It doesn't fit my mind and my thinking. I don't understand this, but I don't know what to do with it. It's there. Um, but that was a fascinating thing to see these ordinary people encounter silence. No one taught them anything. No one told them, think this, do this, but their lives began to change. Now, some people might characterize intentional solitude as running away from the world's problems and pains and ignoring them, but I propose that it's precisely the opposite. It is choosing to face the pain and the difficulties at the deepest level rather than merely keeping busy and avoiding everything. Solitude gives us the opportunity to bring together our inner world and our outer world and to find wholeness. It is possible. Could it be possible that most of us have spent our entire lives living up here in the busyness and avoiding that internal world that we have inside when perhaps it's what we most need? If solitude is the door to our inner world, then perhaps we'll never find it because we live in a world of busyness, a world of chaos and stress. Thomas Merton, a famous Trappist monk, if that's possible. How can a monk be famous? But he has a bestseller back in the 1950s. He wrote that our culture is one that is geared in many ways to help us evade any need to face our inner silent self. And I think that's true. Society keeps us busy, occupied, active, intentionally, music. There are things coming all the time. And because we've grown up in such a society, we don't have much choice but to live lives that are bisected between our deepest inner self and the outer world. If we want to pursue wholeness, we're going to have to go against the grain of our entire society and create the solitary, silent space in our lives to connect the two halves. Now you might think, okay, well, you've sold me. I'll check this out. Tonight after dinner, I'm going to spend 10 minutes by myself in solitude and see if this is worthwhile. But that's kind of like saying, well, tonight I'm going to have a healthy meal and see if I feel better and live longer. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Uh, to pursue the solitude that I'm talking about, I'm not saying we need to remove ourselves entirely from society, but we need to start creating a lot of more space in our lives and create some extended periods of time where we really engage with that. And that takes a lot of commitment and determination and discomfort as well. As I mentioned earlier, it requires an embrace of three separate elements to access our inner world. Solitude, which is pulling away from all the crowds to be on our own, and that's very uncomfortable. Uh, Silence, it's turning off all of that noise and outer stimulation. And then stillness, and that might even be the hardest of all for some people. And that's bringing an end to all the busyness of our lives that distract our mind and keep it occupied. But the aim is to create a bubble of open space around us and allow the activities of our busy mind to finally slow down and maybe even just still for a short while. And that doesn't happen easily. So, practically, how in the world would we go about doing something like this? Now, I've written a little guide to your first time in solitude and silence, and you'll find that on my website, erikstensland.com. Just go to the musing section. But I'm going to go over it today. But even though I'm going to go over it, it may seem a little odd to you because I feel like I'm teaching a class on swimming and we're in a classroom and you kind of need to be in the water for it to really make any sense at all. So I'll do my best. And if you don't get it or you don't quite understand it, it's a bit of a different world. It's a bit, to some degree, it can be a little like Alice stepping through the mirror. But so if you want to try experiencing solitude, what I would say is these little bits and pieces are nice, but I would say you actually want to jump off the diving board to start with and then go back to incorporate some smaller bits and pieces in it. And so I suggest getting away for long enough that you can get over the initial, how could I say, addiction go through the withdrawal symptoms of being in a busy, noisy society. And if it's too short, you won't get to the other side to actually begin to enjoy its benefits. And if it's too long, it might just be uh, too much, too overwhelming for you. And so I usually encourage people, and this is going to sound over the top, and you're going to go, no way. I usually encourage people to take 3 to 4 days as their first time in an extended period of solitude. And I wouldn't recommend much more than this. I think you could start with small pieces, but aim to eventually have 3 to 4 days on your own. And while it's possible to pursue solitude and silence, even in a busy city, it's not very conducive to it. Our busy lives are not conducive at all. And so I think you need to go somewhere for your first time that you can experience it at in a place that's conducive. I recommend getting away from your books, from your music, from your work, from your family, from everything that's not you. And that's a hard, scary place to go. And ideally somewhere that's out in the natural world. It's amazing, but nature moves us. It speaks to us. It invites you to slow down and to move at a different pace. Um, Now, I do a lot of remote backpacking. I'll be out in the middle of nowhere, but I have a hard time entering into my inner world during backpacking. And the reason is I'm thinking about, okay, where am I going to camp tonight? Where am I going to get water? Oh, I got a storm coming in. I got to think about this. Oh, I have food. Yeah, I need to start working on food. Do I need this and that? And so my brain is running all the time. And so you need to go somewhere that you could just kind of shut off for a while. So my recommendation is that you start off, if you're interested in touching on this crazy area, that you start off by going to somewhere that specializes in silent retreats. They usually have rooms to yourself where you can be in solitude. They have walking paths, they'll have meals, they'll have everything you need to create an environment where you can at least get started. It's not where you're going to go all the time. Eventually, you can incorporate it in your regular life. And here in Colorado, we've got a number of places that offer that. Now, many of them, let's see if I've got that here. Yeah, many of them are going to be they're Benedictine retreat centers, they're Jesuit retreat centers, they're ones done by a number of other religious groups, and they're non-religious groups out there as well that offer silent retreat getaways. And I encourage you to look online and find one of those uh, because it's well worth it. And if you feel you must go with someone else, make a pact that you're not going to talk to each other. Keep separate because you need to be in your own little world, which is a weird thing for me to say, but you have to separate yourself out and pursue solitude because that's where the magic is going to happen. And one of the benefits of choosing something like and I'm not Catholic, but entering a Jesuit or a Benedictine retreat center is that they're going to have guides there that you can meet with for maybe an hour a day. And what they'll do is just help you process this whole experience of entering into silence. And if they're good guides, they're not going to be pushing their own faith on you or where they're at. They're just going to help you on your own journey where that's at. And I would highly recommend that you go with a guide because the first time can be overwhelming. It can feel disorienting, scary even. But if you can get through that initial first couple days, you will find it can be life changing. So, what should you expect when you go on one of these silent retreats? Well, transitioning from a normal life to a period of solitude and silence, it's going to feel like you're going through withdrawal. It's going to feel a lot like you've been on drugs and you're having to learn to go without. The first hours or days may feel just overwhelming. You may not be able to sit still. You may feel a sense of panic or disorientation. Everything inside you is going to want to return to a busy life and say, I want nothing to do with this. This is awful. Um, yeah, you might even feel like you're going crazy or that you might find yourself running out the door to escape. But if you can pay attention to those feelings and recognize them and say, well, why am I so fearful of this? And why am I so uncomfortable? And begin to let those go, as you begin to let those feelings of panic go, you will begin to settle in and you'll begin to feel a sense of peace. And it's difficult those first few days, but this is the point that the journey begins. If you can get through that first withdrawal, that's where the journey begins. And once you've started it, you're never going to want to go back. Um, well, you're going to want to go back home, but you're never going to want to go back to a life where you knew nothing about solitude and silence. Now, this time away is you have to realize is that it is something that you don't actually fully control, and that's hard for people. It may lead you into addressing some of those old wounds, like some of the people that I mentioned with the BBC thing. It may lead you into a reorientation of your perceptions about your work life or your family or yourself. It may lead to an encounter with something you don't understand, or it may lead just to a deep sense of internal peace. It also could simply lead to a few days of relaxation with no forward progress in any clear way that you can see. How it is going to play out is something to be discovered as you open and release to it. Now, I've been on many, many silent retreats, and I always go in thinking this is what's going to happen. Never. Not once has it gone the way I've thought. And it's always been, in hindsight, life changing. It's crazy to say that, but it's actually true. Well, I'm going to just quickly go through a few attitudes and actions. I'm not going to go into depth because, again, you're not in the water. This isn't going to be helpful. But if you decide to take a dip into solitude and silence, download the little document I have or print it out and refer back to it because it'll make sense then. But I encourage people, if you want to make use of solitude and silence, you got to come with a sense of curiosity and inquisitiveness about what's going on inside of you. You have to come with great honesty and great vulnerability. Don't hide anything. Who are you hiding it from? Yourself. There's no reason to do that. But we live most of our lives trying to push things down and ignore them. And in silence, they all come bubbling to the surface. Be gracious with yourself. Don't expect too much. Your first time in silence is uncomfortable, and admit it and accept it. It's okay. Have humility to accept you're not fully in control. And if you think you are, well, just sit there a while longer. Come with a sense of great patience. Nothing is going to happen on your schedule, I guarantee it. Let go of your expectations. It won't happen at all like you think. Refuse fear. Let go of all worry. A lot of people get out away on like a silent retreat and it's going, what about my family? Are they okay? Are they in an accident? Oh, did something? And you've got to say, they're going to take care of things back here. Your work colleagues will take care of things. That's their gift to you, and your gift to them is to be fully present. So let go of that fear of whatever it is, and you're going to find a deeper peace awaiting. Resist any feelings of accusation or blame, heaviness or despair. And then some activities. What should you do? Oh, you're going to love the first one. It's a lot of fun. Resist the temptation to fill that empty space. Everything inside you says, I'm going to write a letter. I'm going to do some exercise. I'm going to do jumping jacks. I'm going to listen to music. I'm going to read a book. You're trying to create an empty space. And it's a very hard thing to do. I oftentimes think our inner self is a lot like a shy bird. It's perched out in the branch further away, and it's waiting until there's this quiet, safe space there. And then when we least expect it, it lands, and we have this awakening to what's going on inside of ourselves that we never imagined. What else should you do? Be present there, not thinking about what's happening at home or work or anywhere else. Be right where you are. Now, the hard one is relax. That's a hard one. Pay attention to the world around you. Are the clouds going by? Watch them. Is a spider making a web? Pay attention to it. Are waves crashing? Just sit and watch them. Just pay attention to the natural world, and it is going to do you so much good, and it will help move you towards this place. I know it all sounds bizarre, but will make a real difference in your life. But here's the key of the whole time of solitude. This is the one thing that it all revolves around, but you got to get to that place of peace first, is to pay attention to what's happening inside of you. Notice what's bubbling up inside of you. Are there feelings of concern or joy or questions coming up? Say you get a feeling of anger welling up, and you got to go stop and say, well, that's interesting. Where's that anger coming from? Oh, well, and then ask another question of it. Why am I angry at that? Oh, I never thought of that before. And why that? And you're peeling back these layers because we're complex beings, and most of our actions and reactions in our world are based on what's happening deep inside of us, but most of it we've hidden and suppressed. And so in that silence, everything just starts to bubble up. And this is your opportunity to begin to address it and just to look at it. Don't judge it, just go, oh, that's interesting. And you think, oh, I really want that. And you go, well, why? And pretty soon you realize, oh no, this is what I really have been longing for my whole life. That's really going to be the key of your entire stay. Record some of those experiences in a journal, but don't spend your whole time journaling. Don't push or force anything. Just do whatever's going to help you focus and relax and be there and realize that it's going to be exhausting facing yourself and you're going to need some breaks. And again, I'm talking to people who are not in the swimming pool yet. So you're going, what? And then it's just repeating this process of relaxing and facing yourself, relaxing and facing yourself. And if you just do that, you will begin to find yourself reconnecting with your inner world. You'll find yourself coming out as less judgmental, more compassionate to yourself and other people, and looking at the world and the silliness going on and going, huh, interesting. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to jump on this bandwagon or this bandwagon. And you end up having this different perspective. Um, I've got a book, Whispers in the Wilderness, and that's basically coming out of the silence and it's kind of reflecting on some of this and kind of in a very simple way, giving you bits and bites of what can be found in the wilderness, in solitude and silence. Now, there's also a spiritual component. I won't go into it too much because public library setting and people of all different backgrounds, but it's there as well if you're interested, that you can pursue great depth and connection beyond even what I'm talking about tonight. And I'm always willing to talk to anyone about that. And then when you return home, you get back to your regular life. If you have gone through that first stage of withdrawal, I can guarantee you that you're going to find yourself hungering after that peace that you had in those times of silence. And you're going to want to start incorporating periods of time in your life where you can continue to maintain some of that. And you're going to want to go back on a regular basis to have more extended times. Once you've touched that inner world, you're going to start to understand maybe a little bit of what I'm poorly trying to articulate tonight. And you'll understand why such a powerful and transformative experience. Now, in closing, solitude, when pursued intentionally for internal growth, helps us reconnect with the deepest part of ourself. It leading us to greater wholeness and greater peace in our lives. Changes made at that deep level have major ramifications on us and on our community and those around us. And I think that if you really pursue this type of solitude, it's not going to separate you from the world. In fact, it's going to help you better connect with your family and friends and the people around you. It's going to make for deeper, more whole and real connections rather than the superficial ones we tend to settle for. Yet intentional solitude is not easy. There's an art to learning how to interact with our inner world in a way that leads to health. It isn't a quick fix, but rather a lifetime journey. And our aim shouldn't be to retreat from the world as hermits, but rather to create life with wide margins and space for things of importance to really grow. Now, solitude may appear to be a dark and scary place, but that door can lead to a vast and beautiful world we never imagined, where there is light, joy, and wholeness waiting for us there within. So that's my talk for tonight. I'm going to let Erik take it from here, and we'll have a period of questions.
1 second, let me bring up the lights. Actually, we're not going to do a Q&A. We're just going to spend the next 15 minutes in silence. Are you ready? Okay. Just a quick note for online folks, please put your questions in the chat. And for in-person folks, if you could hang on until the microphone gets to you before you ask your question, that will help our online folks hear the questions.
Hi, Eric. Thank you. My name is John. So I'm pretty familiar with your work and the way you hike for hours and hours and so forth, often way early in the morning to get to great places by sunrise. Um, do you find that, like when you backpack, when you backpack, that it's a little difficult to find time to truly be in solitude and meditate when you're on what you might call your photography journeys?
It can be that way, yes. What I found, if I'm trying to get somewhere for sunrise, my brain's running. Okay, I'm going to have to do this. I got to thinking of all these different components of what I'm going to do that morning. But I find oftentimes if I have a long day of hiking and I'm out for quite a few hours or returning from a hike and it's in a place that there aren't many people and I know where I'm going, I'm not off trail. Off trail is really hard because you're always thinking, okay, is it there? Where do I need to be? On trail, I can just kind of zone out and be more present. But it's never quite as I find slow, quiet walks in the wilderness where don't have a destination. That's a whole lot better for productivity in terms of connection. So than trying to get somewhere. But yeah, does that answer it?
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else have a question? Eric.
Any rec let's see. Kay asks, any recommendations for silent retreats?
Okay. Well, I don't know where Kay is, so I'm not sure what to tell you, Kay. Here in Colorado, there are several different retreat centers that I have made use of. One of them is a Catholic one just down near Castle Rock called Sacred Heart, and I'll sometimes go there for a few days. I recently had the 3-week retreat at New Camaldoli Hermitage on the Big Sur coast, and that was quite amazing. There's also one up near St. Walburger, north of Fort Collins, that's very good that my wife uses.
Eric, in a scenario where people can't get out because of finances or jobs or things like that, and for those people who are able to get out and then return to quote unquote normal life, in those scenarios, how do we live into those kind of practices in the day in and day out?
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Yeah, it is very hard if you can't initially at least take a good chunk. It's kind of like you learn the basics of walking. You start to learn a little bit of the language of silence and then can take it home a lot easier. Then you can start it at home in the small bits between all the chaos and and fully live into it. Um, but at the very least, I sometimes what I've done is carve out a day and I can go to a friend's house who's on vacation and sit there in the quiet away. If I'm in my own office, I'm in my own house. Oh my goodness, I cannot focus. There, everywhere I look, there's something screaming for my attention. And so I think there are ways to do it on a budget. Taking advantage of friends' houses, going out into the woods somewhere that you're safe, that you can be alone and spend the whole day from morning till night if you can. If you're in a time where you have young kids or life is just like that and you can't get away, I think you just have to embrace and say, this is what my life is right now. When that opportunity comes up, I'm going to find a way to take advantage of it. So
Did you notice any differences in your interactions with other people when you would come back from a silent retreat?
absolutely. Yeah, well, and I think I've seen that I've just continued to change over the years with the more that I put these practices in place. On the downside, when I go for an extended period, it does take me a little while to readjust to the busy world and to interacting with people all the time. I find, you take 3 or 4 weeks and then you come back. It can be you get about half an hour of conversation and think, I'm done. I'm done. but then you eventually settle back in. But I do find that I have much more grace for myself and for other people after a time of solitude.
Yes, Eric, sort of a two-part question. So what frequency of solitude retreats works best for you? And as you do it more often, can you get into it quicker?
Mhm.
You don't have those first 2 or 3 days of
Right.
adjustment.
Yeah, excellent questions. If I had my way, and unfortunately life rarely cooperates, I would love to take a week quarter, but that's not going to happen. And so I get just what I can, and it might be just 1 or 2 weeks in a year. But what I do is start to carve out time in my life every day. Like this morning, I start with an hour of silence and solitude in my tucked away in my little hiding spot at home. Um, and I do find that the more I practice silence, the easier it is to get in. There aren't the withdrawal symptoms. There aren't the panic. And it's just, I know just to be patient with myself, and it might take me just a much shorter time. Those first times I did it were so difficult. And now it's just like stepping into a warm bath. It feels wonderful, and those withdrawal symptoms aren't there. But I think we just have to work with our lives and what we can do. And some of us are going to feel like we need more time, and some of us are going to feel like we need less time. So I can't say for others, but for myself, I'd love a week quarter. My wife's not here, Rance.
Do you ever, when you're alone in solitude, do you ever feel like singing or roaring or making a big noise? And do you allow yourself to do that? Or do you keep the volume level to zero as much as possible? And if you haven't used your voice for a whole week, how do you ease back into talking?
I think for a week or something, easing back into talking is not hard. Uh, just yeah, I've heard of people going decades, and that must be a different story. Um, yeah, let's see. In terms of making noise, yeah, there are times I've definitely made some big noises, especially when all of a sudden something that's so obvious that you should have seen that's been there for decades, and all of a sudden you realize and go, how did I miss this? And yeah, there are times I definitely very verbal. Um, but if I'm at a silent retreat center and everyone else is being silent around me, yeah, not so much.
Right.
So I can relate to the withdrawals that you have experienced, but I didn't realize that there was actually a term and that it was normal and that it's something to go through. So can you offer some techniques to get through it?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Again, the biggest thing is just be understanding of why you're having them. We grow up in a world where there is no space, no, it's just constant noise, and we're in our car alone. Throw the music on, throw the talk show on, whatever. Every bit of quiet space is occupied and filled, and that's what we're used to. And all of a sudden you take all that away, and it just feels like I'm floating here, I'm lost, who am I? And everything, it just, you feel like you're going crazy. Um, and if you just go, oh yeah, it's because I'm going through withdrawal symptoms. This is because I've come from this busy world and now I'm entering this other world. It's going to take me time to adjust. And I think just recognizing that, being gracious with yourself and laughing at how crazy it feels, and it can really help. And again, the idea of at least your first times in extended solitude, going somewhere that you can have someone who can be a guide, meet with you once a day, and just, how are you processing this? How are you dealing? And just help you get your head in the right place can really be helpful during those first times to make that adjustment. And but yeah, it's normal. Just know it's normal. It's okay. We all start that way.
Do does how does your family think about your going into solitude?
Which part of my
Are
family?
are they fully supported? Are they pushing you out the door? Are they
You know what's funny is, yeah, my wife and son both laugh and understand, and they both say I come back as a much better person. That my stress, the things I'm carrying, all the weights and all, they found they found a better place when I come back. They no longer are the top. They're not hovering over me about to collapse and crush me. It's I'm standing on top of those things and I'm feeling like, okay, these are not as big as they looked when I left. And so they like how I come back. They don't like me being away, but they like how I come back, that I'm more peaceful when I come back after a time away. But
This is a fair question, but I'm interested in what you might have learned from children and how children could be initiated into some kind of practice that would they could carry through their lives.
you know, that's actually a question I have never actually contemplated. And it shows my limited world here. But I can certainly see children learning to feel it's okay to be alone, and it can be a wonderful place and a joyful place. You know, when I must say, when my parents used to send me to my room, I thought it was the most wonderful thing. I thought, you think this is punishment? No, this is great. But no, that's something to be explored, but I don't think I have the answers for it. But it sounds like you might have some good ideas.
Thank you.
I'm a Vietnam vet, so I do a lot of hiking.
Can you put that up?
I'm a Vietnam vet, and I do an awful lot of hiking, solo hikes.
Yes.
So I identified a great deal with some of like your direction on the solitude and so
Yeah.
forth. Uh, but I really enjoy long, long hikes, you know, not just out there by myself,
Yeah.
just everything going on and so forth. Great processing time and stuff like that. So I certainly encourage more people getting out and hikes, things like that. And as you say, there's plenty of places we can find for solitude hiking. So
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. Good point. They're switching back and forth between online and here, so.
do you maybe have an example of something that you learned about yourself while in solitude?
Oh boy, let's see. I've got decades of journals here. You know, yeah, I mean, myself and my father before me and other relatives have struggled with issues of stress. And during my last one of my retreats, it all ended up getting kind of laid out before me, all the different aspects of that stress and where it comes from, and perceptions that I had about myself and about the work that I do. Let's, oh, the library's closing in 15 minutes. All right, better hurry up here. But yeah, sorry, we got a recording going on for the folks on Zoom. All right. So yeah, in my solitude, I've had to face attitudes and perceptions and wrong ideas I've had about myself and wrong ideas I've had about work and about the value of work. And it sort of has begun to put everything in place. And I've gone from being very much a type A personality to a little more relaxed. I'm not fully there yet, but I think I'm changing. And most times I go into solitude, I come away with some new nugget or some new thing I've learned about myself or about how I perceive the world that was twisted, that just needed to be changed. And it makes all the difference in the world.
Hi, my question is this. I find at different points in my life, I meditate. And I find meditation to be very useful for me, and it's a way that I can sort of clear my mind of all the clutter and the things that are going on. Do you do any sort of Buddhist style meditation as part of your solitude? Is that part of your practice?
Yeah, I definitely have. Every day, part of my practice is a period of yeah, letting go of everything and all the busy thoughts and all the images in my mind, and just being still and empty for an extended period. And it is a very powerful thing because we keep such active, busy minds. And yeah, it can be transformational. Just even that, and taking that to a longer period of time can really be, yeah, an amazing thing. That it?
All right. Looks like we're at the end of our time.
Do
Erik,
you want to stand so they can see you there?
oh, sure. Erik, I want to thank you for joining us and for sharing. Really appreciate it. I want to thank you all for joining us and bringing all of your questions. Thank Barbara Jo for her help tonight. And finally, I want to thank the Estes Valley Library Friends and Foundation for all the great work that they do to support One Book, One Valley and everything else they do, everything else we do. I'll be sending out a very brief survey about tonight's program. Love it if you could fill that out. Let us know your thoughts. We have just a couple of great programs coming up that I wanted to mention. Our next speaker will be Ryan Jordan from Backpacking Light, who on the 22nd will share his expertise on winter backpacking and camping. That one will be in person only, right here. And on the 24th, we will have the author of The Stranger in the Woods, Michael Finkel, in person. That will be at the Hempel Auditorium at the Y. You can see all of our programming at estesvalleylibrary.org. I'll put a link in the email to our One Book, One Valley page. I'll also include in the email that I send out to registrants the resources, things that Erik has mentioned during his talk. And let's see. Oh, and you pick up an awesome One Book, One Valley bookmark at the first floor service desk. All right.
Mention. And one other thing, can I mention? Okay, I've got it. I've got the thing here. I forgot to mention, a lot of what I talked about tonight, is briefly referenced in my book, Whispers in the Wilderness. You can get it from the library here, or from McDonald's bookstore, my gallery in town, and then a second companion book. And on my personal website, you'll find that article, Getting Your First Time in Silence. And then last thing is February 1st, I'm launching a new website, a new YouTube channel called Beneath the Surface, where it's just short reflections on the inner life, if you're interested. So that starts February 1st. And links are on my personal website, erikstensland.com.
Oh, and one last thing. Erik has generously donated 50 calendars to give away. So you'll find those in the back as you head out. So,
well, I had to pay you for listening to me tonight, so thank you.
All right. Thanks again, Erik. Have a good evening, everyone.